Shout out to G-Man Boxing. Where's the piss bottle? It's over there.
Alright people, review of the week time. So, where do we start? We're talking about everything that happened last week, but there really is only one place to start. It was the card that happened last night in Sheffield. A card that realistically, I think I even said it in one of my videos last week, that it really, with the exception of that card at the time, the rest of the year is looking good for the zone. Boy, that card had some upsets and it had some drama. I was saying that I was on the phone to Ade there a little while ago, and I was saying to him, that card to me, going into it, there was only really 3 fights that I was looking forward to, which were the main fights: Billum Smith, Harper, and of course Kit. Well, I was looking forward to just seeing Kit Galahad, see if he's improved, see if he really. I genuinely thought it was going to be a case of will he get rid of Kiko Martinez or will it go to points. I thought it'd be UD for the 3 home fighters. Boy, was I wrong. Obviously, Billum Smith, he got the UD in a decent fight. He was defending his European title, and he's gone from strength to strength. Hard to believe he was the one who lost against Riakporhe, because he's gone just from, as I said, from strength to strength. Riakporhe's back out this week against Doradola, who is kind of gatekeeper now at this stage, or kind of always was a gatekeeper, to be fair, fringe world level. But it'd be interesting to see how he looks, because he really stagnated with the inactivity. So with Riakporhe, it's a case of just seeing where he's at. In terms of the 2 main fights, because I'll touch on the undercard now in a sec, the rest of the fights, but we'll talk about Terry Harper. I guarantee you I'm going to get her name right. Baumgardner. Alice Baumgardner. Because I was looking at that name and I was like, it's not a hard name, but I'll probably still struggle to pronounce it. Baumgardner, I think I'm getting it right. Boy, I'd heard a few people tell me prior to it that they actually feared for Terry Harper in this fight because of the inactivity, because they've seen Baumgardner fight and she is a lot bigger, and she's powerful, she can really fight. And I kind of had that feeling, like I only seen little snippets of her really, to be honest, and I thought Terry Harper should be able to deal with her. But then I'm thinking, Terry Harper's not the biggest 130 pounder, she's not really the biggest puncher, she's had a bit of inactivity, might be a bit of a, she might not look great at parts in this. But in that first round, you could instantly tell what was going to happen. You could tell that Baumgardner was just a little bit too big, too powerful, and just seemed better overall. Just seemed better than Terry Harper. And her punching technique was on point, and she seems to have genuine knockout power there. The knockout in that 4th round, straight right hand, Harper was KO'd on her feet. Referee Mark Lyson, excellent job being able to get in and stop it, because if Terry Harper had taken another shot flush, bear in mind, it's not like she was knocked out but she still had her hands burning. She was out, so she would have took a free shot, and God knows what that would have done. So Mark Lyson, I've seen some people bizarrely, and these people either don't understand boxing or just really are a bit silly, saying the stoppage was BS, it was premature. What? I mean, like, that is one of those stoppages where, like, literally the only people who complain are people who just want to see someone get absolutely ironed out badly. Because I genuinely on social media have seen people saying that stoppage was a matchroom stoppage, it was BS. I'm like, mate, the girl was knocked out on her feet. There was nothing. I've seen bad stoppages, and that stoppage was as far from a poor stoppage as you get. It was a perfect stoppage. What the hell? Like, I mean, that's just bizarre that people look at that and think, yeah, the referee should have let it keep going. Why? She was clearly out of it, and she only would have ended up getting hurt badly if the referee hadn't jumped in and stopped it. So that was bizarre. Eddie Hearn has said there's a rematch clause in place for that. I'll be frank, I can't see Terry Harper, if she takes it, she's not going to win. I can't see her beating Baumgardner, and to be honest with you, can't see Katie Taylor beating her either. I think Katie Taylor would get ironed out by her. I think actually Katie Taylor would probably be an easier fight for her than this, because Katie Taylor has slowed down a bit, her defense isn't quite what it used to be. Well, it was never great anyway, but she gets hit a lot more now, and I think she'd absolutely light Katie Taylor up like a Christmas tree. So Baumgardner, I mean, she's introduced herself to the world stage now. And she looks an excellent little fighter. Like, she's one of them fighters who, as I said, here's the thing, right? People say in women's boxing that we're starting to get some punchers now. I don't necessarily think it's that case. I think it's the fact that women's boxing, and this is something that people don't really take into consideration, is you have people like Shannon Courtney. You know, you have people like, you know, who else? Natasha Jonas to an extent. Katie Taylor is a good example, who slap with their punches. They don't get rotation into their shots. They don't punch correctly with a knuckle part of the glove, so they're never going to hit you at full force. And you can see it when some of these are, you know, it might be entertaining to some people to watch two girls just swinging and, you know, little pitter-patters, but none of them shots really have authority on them. That's why when you look at Savannah Marshall, it's not just that she's, you know, big at the weight. It's not just that, you know, she does appear to be heavy-handed, but look at her technique. You know, punching power isn't just having heavy hands. It's about your technique. It's about getting rotation in the shots. It's about turning your fist at the correct moment. It's about landing with the knuckle part of the glove. And a lot of women nowadays are actually doing that, and that's why you're seeing a lot more stoppages happen. You know, gone are the days. I think people like Shannon Courtney, and I'm just using her as an example, who, let's be frank, aren't great boxers. I think the days of them going and picking up titles, you know, seeing the talent that's coming through from the Olympics, I think those days are long, or well, not say long, I think those days are going to be gone in the not too distant future, because there are some talented fighters coming through. Like, for example, we'd Raven Chapman on this card of featherweight, and Raven Chapman she's actually been on this channel before. She actually is a good shout. She fought a girl, Karina Kapinska, and I tell you one thing, she has a jaw on her. You know, she's got I had a little joke there planned, but I better not. But she definitely could take a shot. Raven Chapman looked good in that fight, and she's in the featherweight division, so she's looking like a good little talent up and coming. You know, it's only her second pro fight, but we'll see how she goes. They also had a girl, Stevie Levy, on the show. A few people were mentioning her to me, saying, I remember, I think it was when I was doing the zone preview, people were telling me about her. Yeah, I'd heard of her prior. I'd seen her fight prior. Didn't really impress me before. That fight she was in didn't really impress me, to be honest with you. She looks very crude, extremely crude. She's managed by Dave Allen. Good luck with that. And, you know, I was more impressed out of the two girls who were on the undercard, Stevie Levy and Raven Chapman. I was more impressed with Chapman, to be honest with you. She just looked a lot more polished. In terms of some of the other guys, Dante Dixon, he looks actually a very, very good little fighter. You know, he was in a good little scrap with a guy called Jordan McCroy. I seen that fight. It was on, I think it was on the, it might have been on the Before the Bell, but I definitely seen it. It was a very good little fight. It also had James Flint versus Dom Hunt. That was also a good little scrap. So these were some good little undercard fights. I also seen that William Crawley guy. I believe he's actually trained by Ben Davison. So there's some good little talent on the undercard who were up and coming. And then we get to the main event. By the way, I had to bring a charger for this because the phone is nearly dead. When I was going to London, when I flew to London back at the start of October, I'm just going a bit off topic here, but look, it's going to be a long video anyway, so I can go off topic for a minute or two. But when I was going to London, I had a taxi driver who came way earlier than I needed him to, so I had to leave in a rush, so I didn't have a charger, which you kind of need when you're in a different country. And I ended up buying like the first one I can find, which is like a really, you can't see how long it is, but it's really long. It reaches to the other end of the room, so it comes in handy. And I never even thought to use it before in any of these videos. I used to just be like, please don't die, and I only copped it when I was doing this, that oh yeah, that'll reach, that'll extend. So there's that. But look, we got to talk about the main event. Kid Galahad, Kiko Martinez. I think when this fight was announced, I don't think I did a video about it, but I definitely remember, I think in review of the week, or it might have been a preview, saying I wasn't really happy with this fight. I really did think that Kiko Martinez was just being recycled again. He was kind of a name that everyone knows, but kind of a guy that whenever he steps up to world level, certainly nowadays, gets beat. You know, he was stopped in 2 rounds by Scott Quigg, I think back in 2014 or 2015. He's beaten twice by Carl Frampton, stopped once and then lost on points. He was beaten by Gary Russell Jr. a couple of years ago, before he lost to Josh Warrington, which was a competitive fight, by the way. And looking back, as I said in the post-fight, with the benefit of hindsight, it puts in context what Josh Warrington had a very tough fight against Martinez, but he still beat him nonetheless. And it puts it in context that was 4 years ago, and now 4 years later Martinez is a world champion again, having knocked out Kid Galahad. Kind of puts it in context. He'd also got knocked out or stopped by Leo Santa Cruz, who wasn't even a big puncher at 126 pounds. So he really did look like he was kind of a spent force at this stage. You forget that he's 35 for featherweight. That is quite old, but he's been around for years. Like I said, I remember him back in 2009 knocking out Bernard Dunn in a round, and that was in Dublin when I think it's the Tree Arena now. It was called the Point Depot back then, and back then you'd had full attendance. The place was hopping in Dublin anyway when Bernard Dunn was fighting. And I remember he knocked Bernard Dunn out in 86 seconds. The Bernard Dunn was always rubbish, but he was undefeated at the time, and he was really built as the next big thing. He ended up winning a world title, to be fair. Lost it immediately, but still, nevertheless, he won a WBA title at, I think it was bantamweight or super bantam, one or the other. But I remember Martinez knocking him out in a round, and that was, at the time, that was like, what? And I think Martinez had lost going into that fight. It was for the European title. That's my earliest memory of him. I think that was in 2008 or 2009. So he's been around a long time as Kiko Martinez. And, that fight right there, I saw a certain Harley Quinn in the interview after immediately saying it was all down to the weight. Making it out as though Kid Galahad, if it hadn't been for the weight. Do I think the weight played a factor? It potentially could have. But here's the thing. He only missed weight by an ounce. So it wasn't like he came in a pound overweight and had to spend the next 2 hours cutting the pound. An ounce, that could be just a case of miscalculation. Because it's not like, Shannon Courtney missing weight by, I think it was nearly a pound or in around that. It's not like when Scott Quigg fought Valdez and he was 3 pounds overweight. It's not like that. A case of an ounce. It is literally, I think, a case of just maybe a miscalculation. Maybe the scale he was on was reading different. It does happen. It does happen. So, for me, I don't read that much into it necessarily. The weight. Although I've known for the last few years that Kid Galahad has been tight at 126 pounds. He definitely looked the bigger man in there, certainly, than Kiko Martinez. So, is he probably making weight easy? No. But is the struggle that bad? I wouldn't imagine it's incessantly bad. But I'd say I wouldn't be surprised if he moves up in his next fight. Certainly not. There was a lot of talk that potentially Navarrete was going to be next for Kid Galahad, which would have been a very, very good fight. And, I think with Kiko Martinez, although I would imagine there's a rematch clause in place for this because it's a voluntary, so theoretically, unless Eddie Hearn has no reason, unless Eddie Hearn was that confident, then there should be a rematch clause. How would Kid Galahad be after a knockout like that? Because you got to think, a knockout loss like that's going to take some coming back from mentally, and they were heavy knockdowns, very heavy. And I remember Michael Vernon Page saying when he was knocked out, I think it was Bellator, that it took him, nearly a year to fully recover from the knockout. And I think I remember Abner Mares, when he was knocked out by Johnny Gonzalez, what did he say? It was a year, 2 years? Was it more? It was a long time before he was able to fully recover. Those were heavy, heavy knockdowns and knockouts he suffered against Kiko Martinez. So one would wonder, what would Kid... And you got to ask the question, when you're knocked out like that, and they're big shots like that, could your chin be dented a bit? We've seen that happen. Derek Chisora still does have a great chin, but when he was knocked out by David Haye, he fought a guy called Edmund Gerber, and he was noticeably buzzed in that fight. And that to me showed that his chin, Derek Chisora always had a good chin, so even if you knock a bit of punch resistance off him, it's still an above average chin. But he started getting hurt a lot more than he did prior to that. Now, that's kind of the card in a nutshell, the UK card. Obviously, there was 2 fights on in the States, which was Dave Benavidez, who subsequently called out Canelo after it. I seen highlights of his fight. Dave Benavidez at 168 is still a formidable force. He called out Canelo, as I said. The thing about that fight, right, is if you're Canelo Alvarez, where's the incentive? It's an all-Mexican affair, which would probably do great numbers, especially if it's Mexican Independence Weekend or Cinco de Mayo weekend. You're talking that fight would do great numbers because, you have the two Mexicans. The Mexican fans would come out in force. I believe he said in the interview after the fight, I know a fight with Canelo won't be easy, but I'm willing to give my heart and my soul in the ring to get the victory. I know I can get it done. He wants that Canelo fight. Be interesting, definitely. Again, but what does he bring to the table? You see, it's not like he's coming with the WBC title. Alright, he's lost that title twice, neither of which have been in the ring. Lost it on the scales and lost it for taking a bit of the old how you doing. So what does he bring? As I said, he brings a Mexican kind of fan. What is he, the biggest? Does he have? Yeah, he would. He have a decent fan base, and an all kind of Mexican affair on Cinco de Mayo Independence. As I said, would do great numbers. Certainly, if it was on, probably be on Showtime. So we'll watch that space with Canelo. His next move, it's not going to be till May. So I can't imagine we're going to hear much talk about what he's going to do at this minute in time. Because normally you wouldn't be planning on making an announcement of your next fight. Certainly if it's going to be in May next year until about kind of February time in around that. That's certainly what he did with Billy Joe Saunders. Announced at the end of February after he knocked out Yildirim. That's kind of when you'd expect Canelo. And you might get some subtle hints about him next time. Again, I think Canelo's next move stems from how Artur Beterbiev looks. I think that fight there, how he looks in that fight, will determine what Canelo Alvarez does next. I fully believe that. However, if Beterbiev looks vulnerable, Alvarez will lock in on that. I really do. I think that because that's what two of the four titles at 175. Joe Smith, you probably pick him over. Likewise, Dimitri Bivol, you probably pick him over both of them. Imagine that. Imagine Canelo would be able to unify. I'm just throwing this out there hypothetically. I'm not saying it'll happen. But imagine Canelo did move up to 175 and was able to unify that division to undisputed in a similar amount of time to super middleweight. That would be absolutely crazy. Two-way undisputed champion in less than a year on both. That would be... I can't see that happening, to be honest, but just to throw it out there. That would be crazy if that did happen. That would be absolutely crazy. Sandor, Martin and Kiko Martinez, with two huge upsets. It's been quite incredible for Spanish fighters as of late, hasn't it? They're really up, they're booming, aren't they? Sandor Martin, you got Kerman La Horaga, who's fighting in a couple of weeks, I think, on one of them Matchroom Spain cards. He's always in entertaining fights, and he's got a massive following over there. I think he's from Barcelona. And obviously Kiko Martinez, now world champion again. It's been good for them. But Eddie Hearn, I actually meant to talk about this sooner. Eddie Hearn, I have him in the thumbnail. It's been a bit of a nightmare for him, hasn't it though? Over the last few weeks with Matchroom and some of their fights. Because how many world titles has he lost? I'm just trying to think. He's lost over here in the UK. He lost 2 last night. Alright. AJ obviously lost his world title. He had someone else, I can't think. Shannon Courtney lost hers. Anthony Fowler, although he's promoting Liam Smith, you can tell he's invested more in Fowler. So Anthony Fowler lost. That wasn't good for him. Ted Cheeseman lost to Troy Williamson, who I believe is still promoted by Frank Warren, so that obviously would have ticked him off. What else? Who else? I think that's kind of... obviously Mikey Garcia lost to Sandor Martin, which obviously was not good for him. It's been quite a rough kind of time for Eddie Hearn. He's been losing some of them titles. At the minute now, how many champions does he have? Kay Taylor. In terms of UK fighters, how many champions does he have? Like fighters, I mean, like are from the UK. I'm not talking about in general. How many UK champions does he have? He's got Lee Wood. I'm struggling here, people. I really am. He's got Lawrence Okoli, Lee Wood. I'm just thinking of the divisions. Canelo was kind of... Well, we're talking about British fighters, but Canelo is kind of doing what he wants to do. There's no one at middleweight. No one at light welter. There's no one at welter. He's known at 154. He's known at lightweight. He's now known at super feather in terms of British fighters. He's Lee Wood a feather. Damn, he's really 2 male. And then you, in terms of female fighters, doesn't have Kate Taylor's not British. Try to think female fighters. Who does he have? Doesn't have Savannah Marshall anymore. Jesus, man, this is a man who had like pretty much every other title. Like it seemed a couple of years ago. He's running shy. It's been rough. It's been rough for him. It's been crazy. I wonder what it is. I wonder is part of that maybe a bit of bad matchmaking. You know, bringing people in without really kind of like, put it like this, right? It's easy now to say with the benefit of hindsight, but Mauricio Lara, a Mexican puncher who's got, you know, a loss or 2 on his record, but is a bit unknown, but you hear good things about him. Is it really a good idea to put him in there with one of the guys you're trying to, you know, get to world title level, like Josh Warrington, and after being inactive? You know, you kind of look at that and you just think the matchmaking is maybe not, because fighters like him are fighters like Emmanuel Navarrete. Lest we forget, he was brought in as a sacrificial lamb to Isaac Dogbay on a Top Rank show a couple of years ago. Look at him now, 2-weight world champion. So you got to wonder, is it the matchmaking maybe that's not the best? Are they maybe taking are they taking a too easy approach with some fighters, or maybe they looking at certain fighters, not really looking into who they are and where they came from? Potentially. Let's have a look-see. Oh, interestingly, it's reported that Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant did 800,000 pay-per-view buys, according to Dan Raphael. That's interesting. That's I would say that's not too bad. You know, Canelo has done 1 million pay-per-view buys before with Triple G, over 1 million with Canelo. I think Chavez Jr. and him did about 1 million, or certainly high numbers. Caleb Plant is not a big name. Certainly from what I've seen, he's not really been known as a big name. So Canelo Alvarez has some drawing power. 800,000. That's more than, I'd imagine that's more than the Wilder Fury trilogy did. I'm not sure about the second fight, but that's still good going. Triple G versus Riyada Morata. I will talk about Mongia now. I just slipped my mind. I'll talk about that fight now in a sec. Triple G versus Morata on December 29th in Japan. That's on a Wednesday, I think. That's one thing I like about Japan. They do fight. They don't do things by the book over there. They really don't. They put certain fights on, big fights on, during the week, and you'll find it very interestingly. Sometimes what they do is they put the main event on, like the third fight on the card, which is technically the main event. I remember when Naoya Inoue fought Juan Carlos Payal. That fight was on like pretty early in the card, and then there was like fights on after it, and like early even by there. Like it wasn't like, oh, it's early in Ireland UK time, but in Japan it's like that card still had plenty of fights to go, but that fight was kind of it was weird. It's weird the way to do it over there, but it's going to be in Japan. Murata versus Triple G. That fight to me is interesting. I just find that fight very interesting. Murata, if this had been Triple G of 2016, 2017, he'd have beaten. I would have picked him over Murata without much trouble. But this Triple G, he's pushing 40. He's definitely seen better days. He's slowing down. Murata always fights very well when he's in Japan. He's one loss in Japan, which was against Hassan Ndam, to the extent where Gilberto Mendoza, the president of the WBA, even said, "This is a disgrace." Imagine that, your own champion getting the win, and the president saying, you shouldn't be champion. That's how bad a robbery that was. He obviously knocked him out in the rematch. And then when he fought Brandt in America, he seemed a bit like a fish out of water. Brought him to Japan, was good to go. So Murata versus Triple G in Japan is going to be very interesting. Very interesting. I'll talk about Mongia versus Gabe Rosado. I did watch the fight. It was a very, very good fight. Mongia is improving. He is. He has some good boxing ability there. You know, he seemed a bit, I don't want to say, I think he saw the Beck Melikuziev knockout that Rosado had, and maybe was kind of thinking, I don't want to make that same mistake. I don't want to walk onto something like Beck the Bully did. Beck the Bully's a super middleweight. This back down to middleweight. I'm thinking he was a bit kind of cognizant of that. Once he lets the shots go, he lets his hands go. Mongia is just fun to watch. I never tire of watching Hearn Mongia. Never do. He's just entertaining to watch. Gabe Rosado is a fighter who has, albeit a lot of losses, there's a lot of decisions there that shouldn't have been. Gabe Rosado was a warrior. He really is. He will fight anyone. And the Danny Jacobs fight was a stinker, but he was unlucky there. Was it Selecki he fought that he got a draw, which was absolute BS because he won that fight? I don't know how he got a draw on that. No, it wasn't. Was it Selecki or was it Luis Arias? I think it was Luis Arias. I think he lost to Selecki legitimately. But I've seen a couple of his fights where he's won but just not got the decision. Even against Martin Murray, that was a real controversial fight back a couple of years ago. So Gabe Rosado, he's a warhorse. He's tried and tested, and for someone who's had because he's had some hard fights. Like he took a beating against Triple G, against Lemieux. The Beck the Bully fight was tough for him before he ended up getting the knockout. He just seems to just be able to keep going. So Hearn Mongia, be interesting to see him against Triple G. Would be so interesting. It really would. Like I'm just thinking, Gabe Rosado versus Triple G. That fight right there. And remember, cast your minds back, and maybe things happen for a reason. He was meant to be the opponent for Triple G after the Canelo rematch in 2018, which was meant to happen in May. Didn't happen because of the tainted beef situation. And I don't think the WBA were going to sanction it. Because I don't think... No, he didn't. I don't think Mongia had ever fought a middleweight at the time. At the time, he was mandatory for the WBO at 154. He ended up winning that fight against Saddam Ali. And I remember he was meant to... And he was only about 21 years old at the time. At that time, I don't think him against Triple G would have ended well for him. I think he would have been competitive because he's a very good fighter. But I think that would have been too much too soon. Now, Triple G is aged. Mongia is improved. He seems to have a very sturdy chin. Because whenever he's been hit, and he's been hit a few times by good punchers, or fair punchers certainly anyway, didn't appear to bother him. So very good chin on Hearn Mongia, entertaining style. I like watching Hearn Mongia fight. I really do. He's one of those fighters who's just value for money, entertaining, can box a bit as well, has a good bit of... I like him. Mongia is a great little fighter. He really is. And even for 160, he is huge. He's a massive 160 pounder. Massive. Announced that Gilberto Ramirez will face Yorniuskas Gonzalez in a light heavyweight clash. Winner mandatory for Dimitri Bivol. Oh, now that's interesting. Not the fight. Gonzalez is washed. He's seen better days years ago. Ramirez should win that. But him against Dimitri Bivol. Now, people, that is a fight I'd be interested in. I might even say it now that Ramirez wins that fight, because I've rated Gilberto Ramirez. I remember when I first seen Ramirez, he actually fought Maxim Vlasov. It was on a HBO card. I forget who was top of the bill, but it was at 170. It was a catchweight 170, and he looked pretty poor in it. Now at the time, Vlasov, I thought he was, and so did I think most people, thought that he was just kind of a guy who was just kind of there. He was never going to crack world level. He'd already lost to Chilemba. He just kind of seemed like a fairly run-of-the-mill fighter. Now that was a competitive fight. Competitive, but Gilberto Ramirez won it. Won it clear enough. But everyone was kind of looking at Ramirez, and even I was kind of like, are you that good? Really? Then he went in there against Arthur Abraham and just blew him out of the water. Did everything but stop him. And he nearly dropped him as well in that fight. But he did everything but stop him. And he improved. And since then, there's a few lulls. There's been a few lulls in his career. But for the most part, he's been improving. And now I think he's in the right weight division. He's been looking pretty decent. Him against, if he gets by Gonzalez, which I expect him to do, him against Bivol, I think he might do it. At ambidextrous, because he is ambidextrous by the way, hard hitting, 6'2" Gilberto Ramirez. That's going to be interesting. Yes, obviously we have Chris Eubank Jr. announced, him against Liam Williams. That's a very, very good fight. I look forward to seeing that fight. Sky versus the Zone. And I kind of talked about this briefly already. I think I talked about it when the fight was announced. So you're going to have the Zone versus Sky going head to head. I'm just going to say it. Sky on paper, just judging by the main events, because I'm going to assume Katie Taylor's going to main event the Liverpool card with Conor Benn on the undercard. Liam Smith versus Chris Eubank Jr. Those two fights pale in comparison to this one fight. So instantly I'm looking at the Sky card thinking, I want to watch this card. I know Eubank Jr.'s history has been his undercards are normally quite strong. So you can imagine, hopefully this card is going to be no different. He will have a decent undercard. And Sky, as I said, will market the absolute you-know-what out of that fight. That will be marketed to the hill. Football games, dart games, etc, etc, etc. They will market that fight to the hill. So I can imagine that will probably come out on top over the Zone. Certainly for that fight. The Zone, as I said, they just don't have enough sources to promote their platform. They have Maya Jama who can tweet this to her followers. They can go on IFL interviews and say this and all that, but I don't think it's going to have the same draw, or it's going to bring as many people as it would be as if it was shown during a football game. Look, we have this person fighting, we have Eubank fighting, etc. It just doesn't have that. So I think that's going to be an issue. Just what I think. Estrada vs Chocolatito 3, January 22nd. Mark that in your calendar. Excellent fight. The first fight was good, right? I think I've only seen that first fight once. I've seen it years ago. But the rematch this year was brilliant. One of the fights of the year. Easily one of the fights of the year. So watch the space, mark it in your calendar. The third fight, I think Estrada has the momentum. I thought Gonzalez won the actual rematch, believe it or not. I had him winning, but I think Estrada should take this. I picked him to win the last one, and I picked him to win on split decision as well, by the way, and he did. But I thought he'd win it legitimately, as in, like, I wouldn't think Gonzalez won, but I did. So that's a great fight. Mark that in your calendar. Kell Brook has declared he signed his side of the deal. Yes, he said this in an IFL interview for a fight with Amir Khan. I'm going to be frank, I will watch it. And I think it's because both guys are so far gone at this stage, it makes the fight more entertaining. I think that if these had fought prime for prime, and don't get me wrong, I would have rather have seen it in their prime, I think Kell Brook would have won. I think he would have walked Amir Khan onto a chocolate brownie. Alright, I think Amir Khan seems to have a knack for getting around southpaw lefts easier than he does orthodox straights. So I reckon Kell Brook would have been able to land something on him, would have been able to land one of them right hands, and Amir Khan's chin is about as useful as a glass hammer, basically, in the grand scheme of things. That's about as good as Amir Khan's chin is. So I think Kell Brook would have won in their primes. Now, both guys have regressed. We've seen Kell Brook against Terence Crawford a year ago. That was a sad sight. The last time I saw Amir Khan, when was the last time I seen Amir Khan? When he fought Billy Dib in Saudi Arabia. I think that was the last time I saw Amir Khan fight. So it's been a long time. Amir Khan, he's always been inactive. He's always had stretches of inactivity. I can't imagine he's improved in the subsequent 2 years, So we'll watch the space. I'd like this. Maybe it's nostalgia, but I think the fact they're both over the hill, it's a good little leveler. Would it do a stadium? Probably not at this stage, but I'd still watch it. I'll watch it to see. When you have two guys who are both on the tail end of their career, who've both seen better days, some of them can end up fun. Kubrat Pulev set to face Frank Mir in Trader's new sport called Triad Combat. It's the first time hearing of this. What's it saying? The sport features boxing versus MMA in a triangular ring, 2-minute rounds using crossover gloves. Jesus. Frank Mir, didn't he fight Steve Cunningham? I think that was on the Ben Askren Jake Paul undercard, and he lost that fight to Steve Cunningham. I think he lost every round to Steve Cunningham. Steve Cunningham is nearly 50 or well in his 40s, but that just shows to show what Steve Cunningham's. Steve Cunningham was a former world champion boxer. You know, even though Steve Cunningham's seen better days many years ago, he still has a little bit of skill in there. I think that's pretty much it, unless I'm missing something, which I think I covered everything else. Obviously Conor Benn, Chris Algieri was announced. I think that's pretty much it for the week, and I've no idea. I reckon I've been on for over a half hour because I've been looking at that clock and it just seems to time flies by. So I don't want to have this drag on for ages and ages. So that's why I keep talking, because it's dragging on for ages and ages. So I think I'm going to call it here. Get this video edited and get this video uploaded. So for now, lads and lassies, happy Monday. Hope you enjoyed the video. This week, I need to do more this week. I didn't do enough. I haven't done enough the last few weeks. There's so much more for me to talk about that I'm just maybe being, I don't know. Am I not doing enough, or am I doing just enough, or what? I don't know. I guess I'm just a harsh critic. I always feel like I could be doing more, you know, that sort of way. I feel like I could be making more, doing this, that and the other, but look, some days it's just tired. Don't know why I'm talking about that, but anyway, look, I'm going to leave it there. For now, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you could, please smash the like button. It does help me out. I want to get to 6k before the new year. I'm not that far off. I'm like 250 subs off 6k. Can we get there by the end of the year? I hope we can. I think we can. Of course we can. Why not? No reason we shouldn't. If you could though, like, subscribe, all that jazz. Peace.